All right, guys, how we doing? So I keep getting comments on videos about my Nelson videos, how to beat the Nelson bot on chess.com, saying that the whatever kind of approach that I'm proposing, I think I've made 3 videos on him already, that he keeps playing random moves and throwing his queen out and causing people lots of problems. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play Nelson again. I'm just choosing random color. I don't know whether I'm going to be white or black. And I'm going to apply the Goldfish method to playing this annoying bot. Okay, so what do we do? I'll start with e4. So if you haven't seen my Goldfish method videos, the principle is that you want to adopt the quality of the goldfish. So the idea is the goldfish doesn't have much short-term memory, and so every time you look at the board, you're going to be looking at it as though it's for the first time. Okay, so I've brought out my knight to f3, and he's brought out his queen there to f6. Not a very principled opening. So here's what we do, right? This is the system. What you're going to do first, you just scan over the board and you mark any pieces that are undefended, right? So I'm going to draw an arrow for every piece that's defending another piece, okay? And it doesn't take long. Okay, and there we go. And the queen's defending that and that, right? I know it looks like a mess, but the point is that what this lets you see is which pieces are defended only once, and which pieces are defended not at all. It also can help you to identify defenders that are overworked, like they've got too much, they're defending too many pieces on their own. Okay, so I mean, this is my opponent's position. Let's do my position. Bishop's defending those, queen's defending them. You ignore the rooks and the king, by the way, here. So that's actually undefended, and the king's defending that. Okay, the queen's also defending the bishop. So I've got one undefended pawn, and black's got one undefended pawn. So I mean, we've only made 2 moves, so we're not very far into the situation hasn't really developed yet. Okay, so we've got a queen on here. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to punish that queen. So my first idea is to bring out my bishop to g5. Now I can't do that right now because I've got a pawn on d2. And obviously with your dark squared bishop, a dark squared pawn has to move in order for that bishop to enter the game. However, I don't want to play d3 right now because it would block off the passage of my light squared bishop, okay? Another option could be d4. I could play d4, and that square is attacked twice and defended twice. Okay, so let's say I play d4, we could have pawn takes. I think that's all right, actually. Then I get my knight further into the game, or I get my queen further into the game. Let's put the question. Let's see if he wants to exchange queens early on. Okay, he's exchanged queens. That's fine. So he's thrown in a check. So this is an attack. Right, so I'm going to colour that one in red. Okay. Normal defence. Everything still applies. King's defending that. That's undefended. And yeah, I can see that every piece that doesn't have an arrow, at least one orange arrow pointing to it, is an undefended piece. Okay, so that knight is technically undefended also. Right, so I've got 2 undefended pieces, and that's undefended, and that's undefended, and the bishop's undefended. Right. So what you can see, even just by colouring in the undefended pieces, and by the way, you can't do this on the mobile app as far as I know. You can only do it in the browser. It can help you to spot opportunities like, obviously, free captures. It might be a hanging piece. So if it's under attack and undefended, it's hanging. So in this case, we've got the bishop there. Obviously, I'm in check. I've got to do something about the check, and I've got a few options. So the next thing that you need to do is, okay, candidate moves, right? Well, pawn to c3 is an obvious one. It hits the bishop, it's then attacking the bishop, and the bishop is going to have to move, and that will gain me time, tempo. Tempo is just the Italian word for time. I'm also seeing that my knight could maybe come here at some point, so we know that we've got a couple of undefended pawns here, which is pretty cool. Okay, so that's one idea. I could also move my knight there, right? But if I move my knight here and then bishop captures and pawn captures, I'm going to end up with doubled isolated pawns on the c-file, so let's discount that idea. Candidate move number 3 could be bishop to d2, and then if bishop takes, we've got knight takes, and that's all right. I'm all right with that. So which is best? Here, with the possibility of swapping off bishops, but that would mean that I've got 2 minor pieces developed and black's got nothing. Nothing at all. That's all right. The problem with c3, one issue with c3 is it blocks off this square, so my knight might have trouble getting into the game. However, maybe I can play my bishop out at some point, then my knight can come to d2, maybe to f3 as well. So on balance, I'm going to push c3. And he's run away. Okay, so now what's the situation? I've got a couple of pawns out in the board, got 1 minor piece each out in the board, so I'm slightly in front, and the queens are obviously off. So I think a good move. So, right, before we start thinking about good moves, okay, these are now defending each other. So this pawn that was undefended is now defended again. Okay, that's there, undefended, king's defending that and that. The knight's defending nothing at all, the rook's defending the knight, rook's defending the knight. Okay, the bishop is actually undefended there, technically. So, what does this tell us? Well, how about one idea? Let's do this in a different colour, right? There's a candidate move, knight to f5, right? So it's hitting that pawn and it's also hitting that bishop. And if I capture that bishop, right? Look at what's defending the bishop. There's only one thing defending the bishop. The c pawn is the only thing defending the bishop, okay? Now, so if I play knight to here, let's just play this move for the fun of it. Okay, this pawn is undefended. But the bishop is defended only by a pawn. Now, if I capture that bishop with check, he's got to recapture, and look, he's messed up his pawns. Doubled and isolated pawns now on the d file, and that means there's no pawns on the c file and there's no pawns on the e file. So for the rest of the game, unless I allow him to capture inwards with one of these pawns, right? These pawns can't defend each other and can't be defended by each other. So there will be a weakness for the rest of the game. So before I do anything else, have a sip of coffee. Always helps. Before we do anything else, let's go colouring. All right, knight's defending the pawn, knight's defending nothing at all, that's defending that, that's defending that, defending that, defending that. Okay, so what's undefended? Mr. Bishop and this pawn here. All right. So, what can we do to put pressure on our opponent? Well, let's take advantage of this undefended pawn that's just captured there. So I could, for example, bring my bishop out here. That's not a bad move at all. Let's just play that move. It's a developing move. Okay, now he's responded by moving forwards. So what has changed now? I mean, it's opened up this diagonal now. All these squares my bishop could go to if it wanted to. It doesn't have to. Another idea, I could push the pawn forwards, could capture the knight. There's not much point doing that. There's very little point swapping off a developed piece for an undeveloped piece, because I've invested a move to bring this bishop into the board, and this bishop is now a good bishop, right? Black's got one bishop here and it's rubbish. It can't even move. It's undefended and it can't move. Interesting. So, what do we do? I mean, one idea here is to develop my other bishop to d3. And then if d takes e, I've got bishop takes e, and I've got 2 bishops out in the board. And I can castle my king. What's not to like? Okay, that's a peculiar move. I never even also considered capture on d5, which is another perfectly good idea. Okay, so Nelson's now made a random move, and Nelson will make random moves. Right, I've knocked him out of his comfort zone. So one thing I notice is we have this nice diagonal here pointing at the H rook, king's rook. So one idea is to put my bishop there. However, that might then prompt f6, attacking my bishop, and then I'd have to move my bishop. So I'm thinking maybe I might just capture here now, and then still keep that in my pocket for later. I think I'll do that. So look, I'm a pawn up now, and he's just made another pawn move, right? He will do random things, this guy. Okay, so now I've got to move my bishop, so I may as well move my bishop to here with an attack on the rook. All right, that's not a problem. I'm just going to put my bishop back here. Okay. Look, I've got two minor pieces out on the board. My opponent is well behind on development, has made far too many pawn moves. Okay. Look at me. I've still got 5 pawns on the starting line. Right. He's got 3. So, what's defending what? That's defending that. Knight's defending them. King's defending these. Bishop's defending that. That pawn's defending that pawn. That pawn's defending that pawn. Rook is defending that pawn. Knight's defending nothing whatsoever apart from the bishop. And this pawn, as we can see, is undefended. Therefore, I see no reason not to capture a free pawn with a fork on the rook that's just moved and the knight. Okay, so now a beginner at this point would go, oh no, my bishop, right? My bishop is being attacked by the horrible rook. I've got to get my bishop out of the way. But let's just check again. What's undefended? Okay, rook's defending that, bishop's defending that, right? It seems like this is just simplistic stuff, and it is. It is simplistic, right? That pawn's defending that pawn. King's defending these 3 things. Okay, what's undefended? What hasn't got an arrow pointing to it? This pawn. Now, I know if I was to put my bishop here, right, I'm attacking the rook and I'm attacking this pawn. What's more, I'm covering all 4 of these nice tasty squares. And that means that Mr. Rook can't move and defend this pawn. So that's, and we've seen this because we've identified the at-risk and undefended pieces. So I'm attacking this guy, I'm attacking this guy, and now, right, is there a danger of a trap? Before we make this move, if I capture there, if the rook attacks, let's grab another pawn. Nah, it's fine, let's do it. Ah, he's attacking me. Okay, now, this is the thing, we are being goldfish, okay? We go, if you want to do that while you're playing chess, knock yourself out, it's absolutely fine. Right, this is our defenses. Rook's defending that, it's defending that, nothing's defending that, king's defending these 2, okay? It takes like, what, 2 seconds to do that, okay? Now, we've also got attacks. Bishop's attacking pawn, bishop's attacking knight. Right? On my side, I've got a couple of undefended things, and the bishop technically is undefended. So I could just grab the pawn. I'm already up 3 pawns. He's been feeding me pawns, and the knight is still under attack. So if I go there, I can't see any reason not to grab the pawn. Okay, now he's moved his knight back. Nelson is playing random. Okay, and now I do have some undefended stuff on the board, for sure. Got some undefended stuff. How can I defend my undefended stuff? Okay, so, I mean, I could move this bishop to defend the pawn. Is the pawn under attack? Yes. Okay. So, one idea is c4. Because if you look at the undefended stuff now, if I push c4, then we'd have this pawn's defending that, and this bishop's defending the pawn. That's not too bad. Nothing's still defending the bishop, so the bishops are still kind of slightly vulnerable. Another idea, just to simplify, is to capture, but then if rook captures here, right, then I'm in check, which I don't really want. So I kind of just like the idea of pushing c4. Right, that's the only real threat. That's the only thing that's attacking anything. Ooh, look what he's just done now. He's just opened up another lovely long diagonal pointing towards its rook. Now what I should do at this point is probably castle, I'm thinking, because I haven't castled yet. I'd also like to develop this knight at some point, which would also defend that pawn. My bishops are still undefended, and those two pawns. But castling would defend this guy, so he'd then be all right. And it adds a second defender to my knight, of course, and now he's pushed a pawn for reasons known only to himself. So, again, start again. What's undefended? 1, 2, 3. But the king's defending all this, right? Rook's defending that, rook's defending that, rook's defending that. That's undefended. That's defending that. All right? Doesn't take long to do. And then you look at the board. Okay, what's the story of the board? What's undefended? My bishops. But my bishops are kind of, they're out and active and attacking. Right, so you don't always have to worry. I mean, you should be aware if something's undefended. It doesn't mean that you have to respond. It doesn't mean you have to defend. Okay, you just have to know that something's undefended, so that if it's attacked, then you can do something. Right, you don't have to jump straight away when something's undefended. So one thing I realise here is the king is the only defender of this rook, right? And this king and the rook are on the same diagonal, and it happens to be a light square diagonal. So I would love to put my light square bishop right there and win the rook, which would be in an absolute pin. However, I can't put my bishop there because the knight is covering that square. So how about rook to e1? Then we could play that move. Oh, right. So he's what's he done? Has he spotted my idea? What have you done, Nelson? Okay, so he's moved his rook here. And what's changed on the board? Well, now rook is attacking bishop. Bishop is undefended. Okay, now I need to do something. This bishop's undefended, and that pawn. No biggie. I'm simply going to move my bishop there, where it's still attacking the rook again and attacking the knight. So I actually have two attackers on the knight. Okay, I've got rook and I've got bishop. The bishop is undefended and it's being attacked itself, so I should do something about that. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to drop my bishop back down to here now, or I could, oh hello, so before I do that, how about now can I do my move? Right, bishop g6 is attacking the rook, and the rook can't move because it was pinned. So now I can capture the rook. King's going to capture that. And now, look at this, right? This is another very interesting point in the game. What's undefended? That, and the bishop. Okay, bishop's attacking the knight, and rook's attacking the knight, and king's attacking the bishop. Now, what can we see from this pattern? Well, I've got two attackers on this piece, 1 and 2. How many defenders? 1. And that means that I can attack this piece. I can actually capture it. However, I've got two ways of capturing. Okay, bishop captures. The bishop's covered from a long distance by the rook, and that's fine. If the rook captures, let's say here, and put the king in check, right, the king can actually then capture the bishop because the bishop's undefended. What? All together now, undefended. So bishop captures knight, king can't capture because the rook's defended. Okay, now with this move, what has happened? What's changed on the board? Clearly, bishop is attacking pawn. Is the pawn defended? No, it's not. So to me, this is a no-brainer. I mean, I've got two options. I've got b3, which will then defend the pawn. I've got knight d2, which also defends the pawn. I'm going to bring out my knight. The reason is I like to connect my rooks. I think that's just an advantage in the game. Okay, knight has moved. What's changed? Not a lot, quite honestly. Rook's defending that, that's undefended, that's defending that, nothing's defending that, nothing's defending that. Okay, Nelson's position is just crumbling, and I've done nothing clever or special. My knight is the only defender of that pawn. That's defending that, that's defending that, that's not defended. These are defending each other, so they're happy. Knight's actually technically not defended, and the king's got all of this. Okay, this is a good reason to keep the pawns in front of your king when you've castled, to keep them tight to the king, because they are defended by the king. Right, and obviously rook's defending bishop. Okay, so this is the story. This is the story of the board. So to me, bishop takes pawn looks pretty straightforward. Now you might have just seen that straight away. Okay, we've got rook attacking rook. The rook is defended by his brother, so no worries. I think we're fine here. I can allow him to capture my rook. This is another key thing for getting beyond the beginner kind of stage. A lot of people will go, oh, he's attacking me, I've got to capture the rook. I better capture the rook, and then the king will recapture, and that's fine. But you also need to think, well, how bad is it if I allow his rook to capture my rook? Okay, so if you think about it, okay, option one is rook takes rook, king takes rook. Then the king's going to be on e8. Okay, fair enough. But another option is I could do nothing. I could do something else. I could improve my position, continue to develop my pieces, whatever I wish. Okay, and so for example, I can now play b3. And I've now connected my pawns, and now my pawns are all happy because they're all defending each other, and this knight is now freed from its duties where it was defending that pawn on c4, right? Makes a lot of sense. Okay, what's undefended? That's defending that, that's defending that, that's undefended, that's undefended, right? There's not much to Mr. Nelson's position at this point in time. He's a long way behind in material. Okay, so the rook's undefended, and so is that pawn, and so is that bishop. So I've got a few options. I could drop my rook in there to e7 with a double attack on the king and the knight, but that's not really, it's a bit of a toothless attack, you know, because the king's got loads of places it can go to. Not that one, but it's got 3 squares it can go to quite happily, and I'm not going to capture the knight with my rook and give up a better piece for a lower value piece. So yeah, it's half an idea, but it's not really a good one. So I'm thinking another idea might be like knight to f3, might then drop it into here where it's attacking both the knight and the king. I need to be aware of the possibility of this knight moving somewhere, okay, and then there would be a discovered attack by the rook on my bishop. But that's all right. I think my bishop's got plenty of time to move out of the way, so I don't need to react at this point. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to play my knight here to f3, because this knight can't go anywhere and deliver any kind of serious threat to me, because it's too far away from anything important. Okay, so now the king's moved. I think it's probably time to bring my rooks into the game. So now at this point, my pawns are all defended very nicely. He's got a light squared bishop that's going to have trouble getting into the game. Now it's got to come now via c8 to play any further part. I could hit his rook by moving my bishop there. But what I want to do now is I want to double up my rooks. Okay, so I'm going to move my rook, and I'm going to move it onto a dark square. I'm going to move it there. Yes, his knight can attack it, but now I can just move my rook here. Okay, so the bishop was then under attack, okay, and undefended, and now I've defended it. Okay, so that's because I did that bit quickly, right? So moving my rook there, I knew that his knight could come to here, and his knight is attacking the rook, but I can move the rook and defend this attacked piece at the same time. Okay, so now I've gone there, he's gone there. Do I want to trade his knight for my bishop? Yeah. Why not? His knight was one of his better pieces. I mean, he's got a good rook and a good knight, and he's got a very bad bishop. So now all I'm going to do, there's actually, what's undefended? Only a rook, okay, and that's no trouble. So now these rooks are defending each other, that pawn's undefended, but everything else is safe as houses. So now I can come in, let's finish this off, come in with a double attack, now that my rooks are again paired and defending each other. All right, so now all I'm going to do is I'm going to drop my rook back to, ooh. So what I was going to say is drop my rook back to here, but if I did that, then I would imagine we're going to have bishop into here, hitting my rook and making it move. And there's no real benefit to that. So, but what I like is that having my rook here would actually imprison the king inside this rectangle. So let's do that. Then I could simply move my rook like to there, maybe, I don't know. Rook is under attack right now. That's the important thing. That's the key thing you have to remember. That's undefended, that's undefended, that's defending that. Okay, that's all Nelson's got right now. Okay, so I'm going to, discretion is the better part of valor. I'm going to drop my rook back to here, where it is defended by the knight. Okay, so this is really helping me to coordinate my pieces. Right, now I'm just going to push pawns at the board. There's really nothing to... Okay, king's attacking the rook. Rook is defended. No worries. Push the pawn. Okay, push the king. Whatever Nelson does now is fairly inconsequential. But you do need to be careful. I mean, I'm going to speed up just a little bit because the game is already won, right? Now, if I put my pawns on dark squares, then there's nothing he's going to do. Because this bishop is in a light-coloured parallel universe. I'm going to move that there. I know the bishop's attacking my knight, but he'd be a fool to capture it. Oh! Anyway, too little, too late. You see that the moment I stopped highlighting what was defending what, I blundered my rook. There you go. So all you need to know, I'm going to make another video about this. Literally, it doesn't matter what your rating is, the benefit of just reminding yourself on each turn what is defending what or what is undefended is just incredible. Okay, so now this king's just going to be buzzing around there like a housefly. It's got nothing it can do. The pawn's defending the queen's defending the pawn back, right? King's defending these, and I'm about to get queen number 2. So there you go, pretty straightforward. Now we'll climb the ladder, and he's got one square he can go to, and I'm going to bring my queen down here. I just want to make sure he's in check every time now. Okay, and I think, okay, that's checkmate, because he can't go here or here. Oops. There you go. There you go. So there you go. That's how to beat Nelson. Yeah, I took my foot off the gas towards the end and lost my rook, but you know, I was already, he was already on the canvas at that point. So if you're having trouble with these bots, slow down, take your time, and on every single turn, highlight what's defending what and what's undefended. Simple as that, and that will help you to spot these ideas. Nelson will mess up. Nelson does blunder. Nelson does rash moves, makes rash moves, okay? You can do this, right? You just have to slow down, you have to take your time, and you have to pull him to pieces, move by move. You got this. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. See you soon.